Nice to see you, Joe. Why don't you have the Starmer interview? That's what I want to know. But thanks for taking the time. Thanks for continuing to talk to me. I was going to introduce you as my former boss, but I'm not sure you quite were.
I think that'd be appropriate, actually.
You basically were, yeah. But now I'm like Megan. I'm free of big media tyranny. So just to start with, I guess, the news of the day, Elon Musk this morning tweeted that the Times is pure propaganda and a bunch of assholes spelled with $signs. Maybe we'll leave the second point aside for debate. But what is he doing? What do you make of that? How do you react to that?
I wish that I could be a little bit more inside Elon Musk's head because he's doing a lot of things at once and understand everything that he's up to. I think he's absolutely using X as a platform for his own, I think you could call it propaganda. And I don't think credible news media is propaganda, and we're covering him and this White House with as much energy and perspective as we possibly can. I don't think that's propaganda, so I disagree with him.
So much energy. There were 80 stories out of Washington on, I think, like February 6th, Danielle said, one day earlier this month.
I think the peak was 95, actually.
So how do you, we've been talking with Jim about these sort of big questions about trust, these poll numbers, there are these big kind of interesting abstract questions Mark was raising about, is trust really even what we want? How do you engage with questions like that when you were just absolutely drinking from that fire hose? Like, how do you even,
Well, trust remains even when you're reacting to the fire hose and in some ways, putting out a big volume of coverage ourselves. Trust is important in those moments, and we are trying to do a bunch of things to enhance that. Part of it is, I think now more than ever, you really can get to know the journalists who are doing that work themselves. We put them on camera, they're big personalities on The Daily, which is our podcast, where you really get, kind of conversational style to understand what they're working on. Reporter on camera video has become a bigger part of covering these big stories, and having individual beat reporters speak directly to, readers, viewers, explain to them what they're working on and how they're working on it is part of opening up the journalistic process. Getting to know the bylines, telling people more about the expertise of the reporters who are working on those stories, making that easily accessible to them digitally. Those are all part of trust. I think they become more important in that environment where there's such a flood.
Yeah, I think the Times has stolen a march on a lot of its competitors by leaning into the personalities of its journalists, which is obviously like the thing we're all reckoning with. It's the direction of travel. But we were talking about this earlier. It's also tricky, right? Like it used to be, we all know, like our newsrooms were populated by people, a third of whom had like totally insane views about lots of things, but were great reporters, and you would never let them go out and talk to anyone, but they could do great journalism. And if now we're all personalities, we're all influencers, can you just not hire those people anymore? Talented weirdos with crazy views, but who are good reporters? That's a lot of people we know.
I'd still hire you. Not without thinking about it. But honestly, I think, yes, every individual journalist has a personality. Sometimes that personality, in the days of sort of ivory tower journalism, was kind of edited out of the experience. I do think that as you do more reporter on camera, as you have a half-hour long news podcast discussion with someone, it's on the individual journalist, to understand that the craft of journalism is being represented in a new medium, and that they're responsible for conducting themselves professionally as a journalist in that environment. If they can't do it, then they're not really, good candidates to do that kind of more immersive, more trust-building exercise.
There's sometimes an argument that who cares about the politics of the individuals in a newsroom because they're professionals, they have a job, there's a code of conduct, sort of like you just said, like your dentist, you don't care what their politics are, did they go to dentist, if they're a good dentist. I'm not sure that's as true in this new environment. I wonder if you guys, and the New York Times newsroom, it's New York, college-educated people, probably about as liberal as you'd expect that demographic to be. Do you just need to go out and hire more conservatives then, if these individuals are sort of representing?
Yeah, I don't really think about it as going out and hiring conservatives anymore than I think about it as going out and hiring liberals. I do want to hire more people who come from different geographies, different personal experience, different background, different schools, different education, whatever it is, because you're right that actually part of your own personal experience, often where you grew up, who you grew up with, whether you're part of a religious family, did you have any military experience, those actually can open your eyes and ideas to a different kind of journalism, a different perspective on the news. We should have diversity in that way. It is important. That's not the same thing as saying I'm going to go out and look for someone who voted for Trump and put them on my staff. As a newsroom, I don't think that's exactly the right incentive.
So when one of the really striking things, everybody wrings their hands about the decline in trust, but it's very sharply among Republicans. I mean, it's very, not entirely, but pretty specifically among Republicans. How do you do you listen to those voices? Like, how do you take that in? Are there things you read or watch where you say, like, okay, they have a sort of good line on sort of legitimate criticisms of, the mainstream media as kind of embodied by the New York Times at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the trust data, comes, especially trust in quote unquote mainstream media, is pretty flawed.
Do you do your own surveys?
We do, and we have a lot of our own reader panels, and we do listen to them, and we do get that feedback. I mean, I do think some of the things the media are doing and we're doing to open up the process are going to be trust enhancing. I also think that we've gone for 40, 50 years of allowing, voices out there to say you can't trust what you read in the media without actually doing much to present our own story, to open up our own process. And we've probably, I hope it won't take 40 or 50 years, but it's going to take some time to see whether we can actually rebuild that kind of trust in journalism.
There is an argument I've heard that the media actually, like, I don't know, our friends from Newsbusters are like driving a truck around here right now with, demanding that NPR be defunded. You're not going to see NPR drive a truck around Newsbusters headquarters, I don't think. But I have seen the Times sort of punching back more. When you're criticized, you'll really go out there. I mean, do you think part of it is playing more offense, is going after critics when they have things wrong?
I think that is part of it, yes. I think just sort of the older philosophy of just let the story, let the journalism speak for itself, and we don't have to defend our people or our institution when they come under attack is not right. I think you can go too far in the other direction, but we still have a long way to go. Our people do their work with an amazing amount of energy, but also integrity. And they come under, it's very easy to attack. I mean, you just talked about X. X is basically it's a cesspool for attacks. And I don't think we also always want to get into it on X itself, but I think making our journalists know that we will stand up for them in the moments when they come under attack, that the institution is behind them, their safety, but also their integrity, is a very important thing to do, and it also allows us to communicate with readers what the actual facts are about a story or about a line of reporting that we've undertaken. So yeah, I think that's important.
Is Trump good for business again?
Is Trump good for business? News is good for business, and Trump, as we know from this first little more than a month, is the most news-making, person to occupy the Oval Office I've ever seen. That cabinet meeting yesterday was, whatever it was, an hour plus of riffing and Musk walking around and Trump, talking about the 5 or 6 things on his mind, was sort of probably the most news-making. Actually, that cabinet meeting that he had in the first term, where there were the pledges of loyalty and to him, was also pretty interesting. But it was, this guy makes a lot of news, and it's really interesting. And some of it is fact challenged, and we have to correct that in as much of real time as we possibly can. But there are also opening up lines of inquiry into federal agencies and the functions of government that none of us have thought about since civics class, and is now part of the news cycle where we can dig in deeply. What does this agency do? When did it get started? What's its mission? Is it still living up to its mission? How much funding does it get? How much oversight or control did Congress have? Those are all issues in the news now, and they're all sort of unearthed by this disruptive agenda of Trump. So is it good for the news business? I think it probably is. It's raising awareness. It's raising people's attention to what's happening in their country. I think it's all, in that sense, from the perspective of journalism, this is a great journalistic opportunity.
Well, the process you just described is literally Donald Trump setting the agenda for the New York Times, right? Like Trump starts talking about something we haven't been talking about, and suddenly you got a bunch of reporters digging into it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you worry you're just kind of taking his assignments, that he's the editor-in-chief of the New York Times?
He will often set, the news agenda for the day in the way that no one other than the President of the United States can. It's on us, and I think we've demonstrated it repeatedly, to come back at those stories in a deeper way with our own kind of standards in mind and an accountability mindset. And we are doing that. We're regularly revisiting the issues that he's raised and come back and asking really fundamental questions about those things, whether, it's some of the issues about, his own conflict of interest and the Trump coin and the way that he's profiting from that, or the way, the Musk and the Doge thing is playing out in terms of Elon Musk's own companies and the regulatory control that he now has oversight of and the way that they might affect the bottom line at his companies. Those are things we're continuously coming back on and doing original reporting on. So yes, he can set the agenda in any given news cycle for something that's in the news, but we have the capacity and the determination to continuously come back at those things and not let him move on from those subjects.
There's currently obviously this sort of access fight in the White House about sort of control and access. And I wonder, do you worry also that that's a place where they've essentially picked the terrain on which to have a big fight about journalism? It's terrain in which we all, hundreds of journalists sit in little rows like in a schoolroom and raise their hands to be called on by a mid-level communications professional, which is probably not most of our favorite kind of journalism.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the right place to sort of have that fight?
Look, I think the issue of the White House pool and the way that access to that is dictated actually is in the public interest. I mean, the exclusion of the Associated Press, which is the most experienced and most professional and most nonpartisan news agency that all of us rely on, whether it's Fox News, which is a little more on the right, or organizations that are on the left, domestic, global, they rely on the AP. They've been in there for generations. The idea of excluding them from the day-to-day access to the president that comes from that White House pool is just wrong. And then handpicking others to come in and substitute, some of them possibly, I hope this is not the case, but possibly not serious fact-based news organizations to participate in the pool just doesn't make any sense. Others have to rely on the integrity and the quality of that information that comes from the pool. So what the White House Correspondents Association does is a service not just to its members, but to the general public. They provide access and a rotation for good quality journalists to cover the president in real time and serve everybody else in media. There's 800 members. There's 800 organizations that have White House access. A tiny fraction of those can actually have access to the president at any given moment. They rely on that pool to provide that. I really don't see the reason why the White House needs to be handpicking that or interfering with something that's worked really well for generations.
Is there anything that the White House could do that would prompt you to pull your team out of Trump's press briefings and out of photo ops?
I don't want to really speculate on the hypotheticals. Obviously, we're watching really closely. They've said that they're going to have more control over this. I'd like to see what their plan is for that and to make sure that they execute it. I really don't think that Trump wants to deny good quality media access. I mean, he's having these cabinet meetings. He's riffing on all these subjects. Doesn't he want those to get covered?
He seems to.
Globally. Yeah. So
he does seem to like
really
attention.
Seem even to be in his interest.
A final question. I actually suspect next year we'll be talking here a lot more about how AI has actually disrupted the business. Right now, the Times is suing OpenAI over the way it trained on Times articles.
Yeah.
Are you disappointed that basically everybody else in media went and cut deals with them?
All right, so just a little bit, I'll talk about it, but I'm not the CEO of the New York Times Company, and I'm not responsible for the lawsuit against OpenAI. I'm in charge of the newsroom. We're covering all the issues around AI, including the New York Times lawsuit, the way a newsroom should, right? So I am not personally disappointed that anybody is cutting deals with OpenAI.
Is AG disappointed?
If he hasn't told me that. And I think every organization has to work out their own arrangement with this world of AI, and the Times Company is working it out too, including experimenting with those AI tools in our own organization and negotiating with the platforms and the others who control it, including this lawsuit, but not limited to the lawsuit.
Okay. Well, I hope our agents can talk to each other on this stage next year. And thanks for thanks for
Good to
taking
see
the time.
Happy to hear
And I think you can go on this side.
Please welcome Jim Brady, Vice President of Journalism at the Knight Foundation, and Semafor co-founder and CEO Justin B. Smith.